Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here, and today I'm going to be talking about the NBA, particularly the current NBA standings and what's going on with all the parity in the NBA essentially. If you're not familiar, the standings are a lot different than a lot of people expected for this year. I'm going to basically be addressing this along with some reasons why things are the way they are and how I think that will affect the playoff picture going forward. So starting off, I'm going to basically just read off the standings and then go forward from there and talk about them a bit. So in regard to the Eastern Conference, things aren't really that crazy. This video is going to be more focused on the Western Conference, but I will go over the East really briefly just to give you an overall picture of that because we are a fourth of the way through the season right now. So Toronto's the one seed, Milwaukee's 3 games behind them. Then you got Philadelphia as the 3, Detroit as the 4, Indiana as the 5, Boston as the 6, Charlotte the 7, Orlando the 8 seed. Those are the playoff teams currently. And then following that, you've got Miami, Washington, Brooklyn, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, and Cleveland. In last place is the worst team in the East. So yeah, pretty standard, nothing that crazy. The only weird thing is the Celtics being the 6th seed. A lot of people thought that they'd be the 1 or the 2, but outside of that, pretty expected overall in the Eastern Conference. Now the West is where things get a lot weirder, and it's a lot closer out there. So I'll get into it here and start reading some of them off. Okay, so the Clippers lead the conference at 15-6 in first place. Denver is a half game behind them. A half game behind Denver is Oklahoma City and Golden State. Then a game behind them is Memphis. A half game behind Memphis is Los Angeles and Portland. And then 2 games behind Portland and Los Angeles, the Lakers that is. 2 games behind them are Dallas and Minnesota. And then you've got Utah, New Orleans, Houston, Sacramento, and San Antonio, all a half game or 1 game behind Minnesota and Dallas. And really, the only team that doesn't have a respectable record right now in the West is the Suns, who are 4-18. But besides that, you've currently got 3 games separating the 6 seed from the 14 seed. And if you want to get more specific, you've got 1 game separating the 8 seed from the 14 seed. And you've got essentially 2 games separating the 1 seed and the 8 or the 1 seed and the 7 seed. So as you can tell, it's really bunched up in the West. It's very close. Essentially, you've got right now. It's looking like the uh, the top 7 are pulling away ever so slightly, although it's still pretty early. Things can change around, and 2 games isn't much to overcome whatsoever. But the top 7 is two games above the bottom 8 in the conference, and besides the Suns, the bottom 7 in the conference are all separated by 1 game. So there's a lot of teams that could make the playoffs this year. Essentially, any team besides the Suns in the Western Conference could make the playoffs and has a legitimate shot. Some of the biggest surprises in these standings are that Golden State's down at the 4 seed. Although they're only 1 game out, the 4 seed is a bit low for what people expected right now. And obviously, these standings are very subject to change because they're all so close. So if you're watching this like 2 or 3 days from now and Golden State's back up to the 3 or the 2 seed or even the 1, uh, I apologize, but that's just because the standings right now are so volatile and subject to change. I can't help but only talk about what I see right now. So what was interesting was I was going to talk about this a few days ago, but I'm only getting the time to do it now. Or about a week ago, the standings were the Clippers as the 1 seed, Memphis was the 2, Portland was the 3, Denver, or I think Oklahoma City was the 4, and Golden State was the 5. That was really weird, but now it's a little more slightly getting back to normal. Memphis is down to the 5 seed now. Um, Portland's fallen back down too, but the Clippers are really the anomaly here. A lot of people didn't think they'd even make the playoffs, and right now they have the tied for the second best record in the NBA. So they're really doing well. Tobias Harris has emerged as a very good player. along with some other guys doing pretty well with them. Lou Williams, Boban Marjanovic is actually doing quite a bit better than anyone would have thought. Um, but yeah, I feel pretty good for them just because no one thought that they'd do good whatsoever, and they're leading the conference right now in the tougher of the two conferences. But as for why there's so many contenders, which I addressed in the beginning of the video, I was going to talk about why there's so many contenders. Okay, so basically from what I thought, I'll list off the teams that I thought were going to contend for a playoff spot this year. Okay, so just looking down the standings: Denver, Oklahoma City, Golden State, Los Angeles Lakers, Trailblazers. Right there, you got five. Then I thought Minnesota, which is six, Utah seven, New Orleans 8, Houston 9, and then I thought San Antonio, so 10. I thought there would be 10 teams, but now there's 14. Those additional teams being Sacramento, um, Dallas, and then Memphis and the Clippers. So the Clippers is probably the least explainable of the four of those. I think that really they just got a lot of ego out of there in getting rid of Blake and DeAndre Jordan, and I think they're all playing for each other a bit more now. Whereas I think last year and the years previous they were more playing for themselves. But they've got, I think a good move was getting rid of Austin Rivers, because even though he was becoming a good player, I think it's always problematic when you've got the son of the head coach playing for the team, because there can be some favoritism shown, whether uh, intentionally or unintentionally. It's just going to be an issue, and whether it's actually there or not, people are going to just think it's an issue. So I think it's good that they got rid of him. I think it's good that Doc is just sticking to coaching and he's not trying to be the general manager or president of basketball operations as well, because that just made him a worse coach, I think. Okay, so yeah, theirs is really just Tobias Harris emerging a bit more, and everybody, they have a lot of players who are kind of like boom or bust players, I'd say. Like Lou Williams is a guy who on a given night he can be 25 points shooting 10 for 18, or he can be 9 points on 3 for 12 shooting. But he's basically been the really good version of himself all the time. Um, Along with this, you've just got a bunch of role players who are playing to their max potential and like really playing well. Like Danilo Gallinari is healthy, and he's usually never healthy, and he's a guy who can give you 18 a night, so he's been doing really well. Um, just those three are probably the main guys, but then you've also got the rookie who I didn't think would make a big impact in Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, and he is making a big impact, so that's a positive for them as well. So yeah, there's just like a lot of internal improvement, I'd say. As far as Memphis, they got Mike Conley back, who is arguably their best player. Between him and Gasol, you can decide for yourself. So they got him back, and then they got Jaren Jackson Jr. in the draft, who is turning out to be uh, probably behind Doncic and DeAndre Ayton, the next best rookie right now. He's been good on offense, really good on defense. He's fit into their system perfectly, um, and he's just playing really well. And I think when you consider that those two guys are back and healthy, along with Gasol, that's basically the reason, is that they're healthy, and along with like the last season that they had their guys healthy, in the 2016 to 17 season, they were a playoff team. So basically, take that team and add Jaren Jackson in place of like Zach Randolph, and that's so you still got a playoff team. Uh, Now, do I think they'll remain like a top four seed? No, I picture them probably being like an 8 seed or a 7 at the end of the season. But um, they are still playing a lot better than people expected at 13-8 right now currently. Besides that, the two other teams that people were thinking weren't, that I thought at least wouldn't be good, that are doing good, is Dallas, who really, it can be chalked up to two things, or okay, three things. Number one, injuries are not a problem this year as much. Dirk is still out with injuries, but his contributions are limited at this point. But you got Wesley Matthews back. He's playing well. He's doing a good job. He's the big key, or not the big key, but a key factor to them doing a lot better. Along with this, reason number two, DeAndre Jordan signed in free agency, an immediate huge upgrade at center, and an all-star in 2017, one of the best rebounders, and at times one of the better defensive centers in the NBA. So bringing him in is a huge factor to them improving their game on the boards and on the defensive end. And then factor number three, which I think would probably be the biggest factor, is adding Luka Doncic, who I'd say is right now the runaway Rookie of the Year favorite. He's playing awesome. Right now, what I think when I see him is like basically think of like Gordon Hayward in his best season 2 years ago in Utah. That's what Luka Doncic is right now. So like I'd say like his floor is like the best version of Gordon Hayward, which is really good, you know. And I think he's gonna obviously continue to improve in the years ahead and continue to get a lot better. But he's definitely gonna win Rookie of the Year if he keeps on his current pace. And he's really the reason that they're doing so well is that he's definitely a franchise player and he's just playing super well. And I'm not comparing Doncic and Gordon Hayward because they're both white. It's just honestly, I was trying to think of like a guy who can sort of start the offense but also create some offense for himself, but is not like overpowering in how he plays the game and isn't a guy who can just take over a game necessarily, but just has a really good steady presence, 20 points a night, and that's the closest comparison I thought was in the current game. Uh, Hayward to Doncic, or Hayward 2 years ago to Doncic. So as for the next team on here, which is the let's see here, who is it? The next team I was thinking of. Oh yes, the Sacramento Kings. They are doing well for a number of reasons. A lot of these reasons are reasons that other teams have had as well. So I'm not trying to be repetitive. It's just that they happen to also share some of these same reasons. So a first one would be just like internal improvement of players. You've got De'Aaron Fox, Willie Cauley-Stein, and Buddy Hield all having their best season as pro so far, all showing some great signs of improvement. They're really getting a lot better in a lot of different areas. Buddy Hield can get a lot more of his own offense and create for himself a lot more this year. De'Aaron Fox doesn't look lost out on the court anymore like he did a lot of times last year. And Willie Cauley-Stein has just been steadily improving, you know. I think people had this impression of him when he was a freshman in college. They thought he was going to be like another DeMarcus Cousins, like this big 7 foot, really filled out guy. And people just immediately associated Kentucky big center with DeMarcus Cousins because he had come very recently before Willie Cauley-Stein. But you know, Willie Cauley-Stein, excuse me, stayed in college I think 3 years, which everyone was surprised by. And then he went to the Kings, and he was sort of like an underrated pick, and no one really thought about him. But there was a time when he was considered like one of the primo prospects in the NBA, and he has taken like 3 or 4 years here to get to where people originally thought he would be at. But now he's like a guy that can average, between 14 to 16 points a game and maybe 11 rebounds, and can be like a like a Andre Drummond light, I'd say. So sort of like a poor man's Andre Drummond. Um, but yeah, they're showing some really impressive signs of improvement right now. I'd say. Okay, so besides that one, the internal improvement, I'd say that the off-season acquisitions or just acquisitions in general, I'm going to include Iman Shumpert from last year. He didn't really play as much last year for the Kings, but so essentially in the off-season, they acquired Bielitsa, who was a free agent who was playing for the Timberwolves. The Kings got him. He's been starting for them at power forward. He's been playing really well, helping them space and pace a lot. And then Iman Shumpert's been starting for them off and on and playing some good minutes for them, and he's really been like the 2015 to 16 Cleveland version of Iman Shumpert, like a good energy guy. Can't give you 36 minutes a night or anything, but is good for like 28 minutes a night. Can maybe score 10 points a game and can provide some good energetic defense, which is what a young team like this needs, I think, is like a guy who is devoted to defense and can bring some energy and enthusiasm and leadership. He is a guy who has won a championship. He has some experience in big moments. Along with this, the guy who really hasn't been as much of an impact as people thought is like Marvin Bagley. I think he's averaging around 10 points a game, not playing that much because Bielitsa has sort of been playing ahead of him. But if he starts to play more and starts to improve a bit, their team will be even better. But yeah, I'd say internal improvement and off-season acquisitions are really why they're doing better. And if I had to pick one of these teams that I think would fall off at some point, it would be the Kings. They're already uh, they're very close to a bunch of other teams, but they're technically 13th in the West. Um, just as far as all these close records go, I could see them slip below the Spurs here if the Spurs are a half game behind them, but if Sacramento loses one more game, they'll be the 14, and I could see them kind of staying there and maybe ending up with like 37 wins at the end of the season. Um, but yeah, they've had an easier schedule too, so they could fall off a lot. But I've really liked what I've seen from them, and it's been kind of cool to see these teams just um, surprise people, I'd say. Okay, so some of the teams that have been struggling more than people thought, to quickly address this in the Western Conference. Golden State, just because Steph and Draymond have been out for some extended time here, that's why they've been underachieving a little bit. As far as other teams, really probably okay. Obviously, the Rockets are a big underachiever. Um, they lost their defensive guys. People have been saying it a lot. No more Trevor Ariza, no more Mbah Mute. So they haven't had much of a defensive presence at all. On offense, Chris Paul's been injured off and on, and he just started missing a few games here, but he was essentially, from what I heard, injured throughout this whole season so far, but kind of just playing through it. But so he hasn't been at 100%. James Harden's been playing well, but it's essentially the James Harden show. James Harden and everyone else. They haven't had Gerald Green or Nene, who I think with some of the uh, losses that they had in the offseason, they expected those guys to play, or Gerald Green at least, to play a little bit more. Nene's the backup center, so they don't really have anyone at center to back up Capella. They have this guy Harkenstein, but he's like a G leaguer who just came up, so they can't totally rely on him a lot. Um, Besides that, just they don't have much wing depth either. They've got Eric Gordon, who they've been forced to start because Chris Paul has been out recently, and so behind him they've got well, what who they would have had if everyone would be healthy is like Gerald Green. He would have been the guy. PJ Tucker isn't really a wing anymore. He's been playing almost exclusively power forward towards the end of last season and throughout this season. So on the wings, they've got this guy named Gary Clark who can play sort of some small forward, power forward. Um, he's another G leaguer who they brought up, not great. Um, and their acquisitions in the offseason really haven't paid off that well. Michael Carter Williams, he really shouldn't be on an NBA roster right now unless it's the Hawks or something. And Brandon Wright, or excuse me, Brandon Knight really hasn't contributed anything to the team. Marquise Chris is actually injured right now, so he hasn't been able to play. So essentially, they've had an injured Chris Paul, James Harden, Eric Gordon, PJ Tucker, Clint Capella, and some G Leaguers. That's basically been their team this season. And Carmelo Anthony's gone, so I'm not even going to waste my time talking about him. So they've had about 7 guys that they could realistically rely on this season, one of whom is an injured superstar, one of whom is an injured star, 2 of whom are G Leaguers, and the other 4 are just trying their best. So it's essentially been a 4.5 man team in my opinion. That's why they've struggled. The Spurs and Utah, those are the other 2 main ones struggling that people are really kind of surprised by. I don't think that they're doing bad necessarily. Utah's defense is a lot worse than last year, so that they are doing bad in that respect. But besides that, I don't know if these teams are doing bad. It's just that the West is so crowded because essentially every team is going for it this year besides Phoenix. And so the result is that uh, you're just going to naturally lose a lot more games because a lot more teams are trying to be competitive. Like last year, I think you'd basically say uh, Phoenix, Sacramento, Dallas, and Memphis were not all tanking, but they were basically at the bottom of the barrel. Whereas this year, only Phoenix and those other 3 teams are not at the bottom of the barrel. So in that regard, just naturally by the laws of mathematics, teams are going to lose more games because the competition is better. Also, you've got LeBron in the West now, which adds more competition. The Lakers are a team that was a for sure lottery team last year, and now they're in the middle of the playoff hunt. So the overall reasons why the standings are so stacked this year is because a lot of the teams that we assumed were going to be shoe-in playoff teams are doing a little bit worse than were expected to. A handful of teams who were expected to be lottery teams are overachieving, and a lot of teams who we didn't think would go for it decided to go for it this year and try and be a playoff team. So that is basically how we arrived at 14 potential playoff teams in the West. Uh, and of course, these standings are very subject to change as every day, like 5 teams can switch positions. It seems like. So the main reason I made this video is because I am loving this NBA season. I love how competitive and close it is. I think it's really cool that there's this sense of unknown in the West where it seems like the last 3 years with the Warriors, it's been so everything's been such a given. But right now it seems like there are a lot of things that are somewhat uncertain. Not that I don't think that the Warriors will make the finals. I do, but I really have no idea who's going to make the playoffs besides them, and it's really entertaining. And I hope you guys are enjoying it as much as I am. Also, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you again next time. Have a good day. Bye.